The year is 1912. The European continent is on the brink of war. Behind closed doors, Europe is secretly splitting into two armed camps. The Allied powers, composed of Great Britain, France, Russia, and after 1915, Italy, against the Central Powers of Germany, Austria-Hungary, Turkey, and Bulgaria. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic Ocean, the United States elects a new president, Woodrow Wilson. Wilson and his fellow progressive reformers believe they can remake the world in such a way as to make war obsolete. So, in spite of the growing tensions in Europe, Woodrow Wilson chooses William Jennings Bryan, a pacifist, a believer in peace, to be his Secretary of State. But this idealistic view of the world will not be enough to alter the course Europe has chosen to take. In 1914, the powder keg explodes. Serbian terrorists assassinate Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. The assassination sets off a chain reaction that spreads throughout Europe. After Austria declares war on Serbia on July 28th, one nation after another is drawn into the conflict. Russia, which has a secret treaty with Serbia, prepares for war against Austria. Germany then declares war on Russia and Russia's ally, France, then invades Belgium to bypass French defenses. On August 4th, Great Britain declares war on Germany, and 2 days later, Russia and Austria-Hungary formally enter the conflict. Thus begins a war that would change the world forever. Europe pours its scientific genius and vast industrial power into the production of new weapons of mass destruction. Long-range, high-velocity rifles and artillery, machine guns, poison gas, tanks, and airplanes turn war into a nightmare of death and devastation. By the end of the first year of the war, 25,000 miles of heavily fortified trenches spiderweb a course stretching from Belgium to Austria. As in all wars, the foot soldier is the decisive focus of gains and losses. In senseless, suicidal charges into the no-man's land between the trenches, hundreds of thousands of soldiers are mowed down by artillery fire, machine guns, or choked by poison gas.
As far as you could see, there were all these bodies lying there. Literally thousands of them. Some without legs. Some were legs without bodies. Arms without bodies. A terrible sight. It didn't seem possible. It didn't get inside me or scare me, but it just made me wonder that these could have been men. It made me wonder what it was all about.
When the Great War begins, Americans see no reason to get involved on either side. President Wilson calls for the United States to be neutral in fact as well as in name, impartial in thought as well as in action. Preferring to avoid any entanglements that might threaten the nation's moral integrity and independence, the United States, since the time of George Washington, pursues a policy of isolationism with regards to Europe. The United States has many immigrants from nations on both sides of the conflict, including some 10 million with ties to Germany or Austria-Hungary. Prominent Americans of all political persuasions want the U.S. to stay out of the conflict. Progressives like Jane Addams speak out against war as an instrument of national policy.
In fact, in 1914, some women marched in black down the streets of Fifth Avenue protesting the war. At the same time, some young men couldn't wait to get in and dropped out of college, dropped out of high school, became ambulance drivers or joined the French Foreign Legion. It was a great adventure, and if you got left out, you'd get left out of the greatest adventure of your lifetime.
Practically the entire political left, led by Eugene Debs and the Socialist Party, condemned the war as capitalist imperialism. Even prominent industrialists, including Andrew Carnegie and Henry Ford, who bankrolled anti-war activities, believed that entering the war would be a grave mistake. Ford, in fact, spends almost $500,000 in December 1915 to send more than 100 men and women on a peace ship to Europe in the hope of negotiating an end to the war. But the war would not be ended by symbolic gestures. U.S. business profited handsomely from supplying food and arms to the combatants on both sides. But both the British and the Germans pressured U.S. businesses to stop trading with their enemies. By the end of 1914, a British naval blockade in the North Atlantic intercepts all ships bound for the Central Powers. After that, U.S. trade with England and France grows, while trade with the Central Powers declines.
So many Americans said, let the Europeans just do it themselves. We don't want to get involved. But as the years went by, American banks lent more and more money to the Allies. And the American economy got more and more involved with the Allied side.
Increasingly desperate to end the blockade, the German Navy launches a devastating new weapon, the U-boat, and in February 1915 announces its own naval blockade of Great Britain. In early May, a U-boat sinks the British passenger liner Lusitania off the coast of Ireland, killing 128 Americans. The United States is on the brink of war. Americans are outraged by the German attack. But Wilson and Congress resist the urge for revenge. In 1916, Woodrow Wilson is re-elected President of the United States under the slogan, "He kept us out of war." On January 31st, 1917, Germany resumes unrestricted submarine attacks. Tensions mount further when the United States learns that Germany has secretly urged Mexico to join the war against the United States. In return, Germany promises to help Mexico recover all the lands it had lost in the Mexican-American War. Throughout March 1917, U-boats sink U.S. ships without warning.
The Germans thought they could bring Britain and France to their knees more quickly if Britain and France weren't getting goods from the United States. And it's the submarine warfare which propels Wilson to make war. And he's come to believe by 1917 that the United States can't live with a German victory, that it's going to change our political economy. We're not going to be able to trade with the Germans. We're not going to be able to deal with an anti-democratic country like he thought Germany was.
On April 2nd, 1917, Wilson appears before a special session of Congress to ask for a declaration of war.
The world must be made safe for democracy. We have no selfish ends to serve. We desire no conquest, no dominion. We seek no indemnities for ourselves, no material compensation for the sacrifices we shall freely make. We are but one of the champions of the rights of mankind.
The United States enters the war, woefully unprepared for combat. There are only 200,000 men in uniform in early 1917. After Congress's declaration of war, 1 million men volunteer to serve their country. To field an army, Congress passes the Selective Service Act, which quickly drafts an additional 3 million young men into the military. So who are the young American doughboys? The typical inductee is single, 22 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, 141 pounds. 1 in 5 are foreign-born. 400,000 are African American. 1 out of 3 are so unhealthy they flunk their physicals. 1 out of 3 can't read or write. So many are ignorant of the reasons they are going to war that worried government officials place a copy of the president's war message in every soldier's knapsack. One of the ways Wilson convinces opponents of the war to accept a draft is by arguing that it will speed the Americanization of immigrants.
The military tent, where they all sleep side by side, will rank next to the public school among the great agents of democratization. Theodore Roosevelt.
Progressive reformers used the war as an opportunity to heighten moral standards.
The progressives thought that the Army was a wonderful chance to educate a large number of people. At the same time, they tried to influence the soldiers to prevent them from drinking, which was a progressive measure, prohibition. Their belief was that they could train these soldiers so that when they came back to civilian life, they would be better citizens.
Men must live straight if they are to shoot straight, cautioned Secretary of the Navy Josephus Daniels. To conserve grain necessary for food, a wartime prohibition on the manufacture of alcoholic beverages goes into effect in 1917.